Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Ann Meeker. I'm Deputy Director of Potbox Foundation. I am a former caseworker, former Director of Constituent Services. And it has been a hot minute since we had a Casework Navigator webinar. We've missed having these spaces. We've missed being able to talk to all y'all about what's going on with casework. What are you seeing in your offices? What are you handling? So the hiatus is definitely not because we lost any interest in casework, but we've had so much going on. It has been such a wild year, and I can only imagine how much crazier it has been in all y'all's offices. So thank you, as always, for taking the time to join us. And it has been even longer since we have had a Casework Navigator webinar in this meeting format, where we hope that you will feel encouraged, but by no means pressured to turn on your camera, to hop in and share your experiences, because today's topic is something that I think we're all figuring out. That is, I am seeing really rapidly changing for how our caseworkers thinking about approaching outreach and thinking about the balance between reactive and proactive casework. So I think we all have a lot to learn from each other today, and I really hope that you will feel comfortable to jump in and share with us what your team is thinking and how you are addressing this. So as I've said, today's topic has been on my wish list since starting the Casework Navigator program, because this is something that I stressed about so much when I was a caseworker. Whenever I kind of got a constituent in who just kind of came from part of our district or community that we didn't have much contact with, that was always the moment when I wondered just who are we missing? Who are we not reaching? If we want to do more proactive outreach, how on earth is my team going to balance it with an already heavy caseload? So definitely something that caused a lot of personal stress for me. But again, like I said, we're really seeing teams find creative ways to think about this and creative ways to balance all of these different obligations and opportunities. And beyond that, too, there are some really big changes this summer that make today's webinar really timely. The first is, as you've probably seen if you're on our email list, we've been banging the drum about this. The House has just changed its ethics rules to allow offices to have a lot more flexibility in co-sponsoring constituent service related events with local nonprofits. If you haven't seen this, I will drop in the chat later the updated guidance, and our team's kind of précis of that updated guidance. But this is a really big change for the House. This opens up a lot of creativity that the Senate has always had, but this lets the House kind of really lower that barrier to thinking about doing cool, proactive, collaborative outreach locally and making the best of those local resources. So that's really exciting. The second big thing is how I was connected to our speaker today. I have yelled about it for a long time. I don't know if any of you have academic backgrounds, but it is really surprising how little casework is studied and understood in political science world. But there is a small, growing contingent of folks in political science who understand the value of casework and understand the importance of casework, and are banging the drum for making sure that that's a part of political science inquiry and understanding Congress going forward. And part of that charge is our speaker today, Rickman Blackwood. So I'm so thrilled that Megan could join us. She is a PhD student at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And prior to returning to pursue her PhD, Megan served as a legislative director for Senator Mamie Locke in the Virginia State Senate. So during this time of service, Megan was inspired to center her research agenda on creating knowledge to inform equitable policymaking and accessible representation. So Megan is one of the proud former caseworkers, former constituent services folks who are now leading that charge to think about casework in this academic way and to think about how can we study it, how can we understand it, how can we really kind of create those bridges for caseworkers to learn from each other, especially at other levels of government. So before Megan gets started, I do want to just say at the beginning, like I said, for me, this topic caused a lot of stress. Every team does this differently. Every team has different capacity for doing this. Every district has really unique needs. So as always with our webinars, we hope this is a chance for you to pick up some ideas and think about different ways of doing this, but understanding that whatever you are doing is already wonderful, and we don't want this to be a cause of any additional stress. So understanding that we are all at the first stages of figuring this out, like I said, I hope you will consider this an open discussion. We have some places where we're going to stop and open it up for chat. And then lots of time for Q&A and discussion at the end. So without further ado, Megan, you want to take it away?
Yeah, hi, I'm Megan. I'm gonna share my screen with you guys. Oh, nope, that's the one I'm gonna share. Okay. All right, perfect. So first and foremost, I just want to echo everything Anne said. I want to thank you not only for taking your time out of your busy schedules to be here today, but also explicitly thank you for your hard work and dedication to casework. During my time with the Virginia State Senate, I saw firsthand how the successful provision of casework could not only just increase positive feelings and trust towards the member, but also the institution and government itself. And as we know, trust in government and Congress specifically these days is in short supply. So I just kind of situate this today on a simple question that's been asked for decades on surveys. Do you think the system of democracy in the United States is working or not? So again, for decades, surveys, pollsters have been asking this question to get an idea of what the American public thinks about their government and whether or not they think it's working, right? And recently, we're seeing some pretty worrying trends. In a March 2024 Quinnipiac University poll, 49% of registered voters said no to this question. If we narrow in and look specifically at legislative branch, we're seeing even more concerning patterns. In a most recent Pew survey found about only 8% of respondents reported either high or moderate levels of trust in Congress. So kind of if we exit our bubble of focusing on American politics and we turn to our comparativist scholars that study the world at large, these trends are kind of alarming and they point towards a precarious path. In Haggard and Kaufman's 2021 Anatomy of Democratic Backsliding, lack and trust in institutions is one of the first symptoms that they look to for a failing body politic. So in the most simplest terms, and to steal a Whoopi meme, America, you're in danger. So what do we do about it? For me, I want to just promise you guys this isn't like a doom and gloom presentation. There's enough of that in the world. And I've been in the trenches with you, particularly during the early days of COVID. I saw firsthand how life-changing casework can be. The work we were able to do to expedite unemployment claims literally kept people in their homes, kept food on the table, and the relief when we called these constituents to tell them, hey, this is in the works, something has happened, it was palpable. So what was even more striking was the unprompted comments from these constituents expressing how that experience and receiving services really made them feel seen, heard, and represented. And here's somewhere where I'd like to take a break and like maybe allow some of you guys to share like some wins, right? Like, have any of you had a situation either recently or sometime in your work, right, where you were able to help somebody and they unprompted expressed how important this was, not only to like them in their life, right, but also to showing them that government is working for them and can work for them. And I just like, we have so much doom and gloom, right? Like, let's take a minute to celebrate the wins. So does anybody have anything to share?
Hey there, this is Ashley Knoll with Congressman Bouchon's office. We're in Indiana 8, so we're primarily rural agricultural manufacturing, our bread and butter. And we have found, just as an office, that it does not matter how many mailers that we send out or how many events we host. Our biggest referral to constituent service work is word of mouth. So when we serve the constituency well, they tell everybody else, and that's how we get referrals. That is just, there's not even a contest. If like it was a pie chart, it would all be one color with like a tiny microscopic sliver. And with it being a smaller district, you know, I always like to explain to people that don't know the work. I'm the senior constituent service rep here for our office, but these are our neighbors. These are our church brothers and sisters. These are our teachers. These are our community members. These are our everybody that we live and work with and see every day at the grocery store. Because we are such a small district, it really resonates. If you help one person in one of our very small towns, that whole town is going to know about it the next time you visit. So we are a gossipy, sewing circle, cliquey group, and I would not change anything about us. But it is one of those things where when we get a win, it's not just celebrated in the office. We hear those ripples impacted throughout it. And so, you know, that is our win. We're very, very lucky that we have a good amount of constituents that are understanding. that are generous with both their time and our time, that are just as compassionate as we seek to be. And so giving us those referrals is just the biggest compliment they can give us, is even if we don't get a favorable resolution, that they're going to tell somebody that they truly believe that we did fight for them. So that's where we kind of get our reward, is because we are so small and we are so insular as a community. Hearing back from them in real time and getting those referrals for us is a big win.
Oh, that's so good to hear. Anne, you had your hand. Did you want to jump back in? Are you moderating? You're such a good moderator. I saw the hand go
Oh
up.
no, I was just doing the clapping emoji.
Oh,
So Ashley,
yeah.
really good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Did anybody else want to share a quick win? If not, we can keep going. Thank you so much, Ashley. I'm going to talk about it later, but I was like, it's never just one touch. Like, that's literally in the script on my slides later about how it's like, oh, you're around the water cooler and the government doesn't care about us. That's not true. Representative X just called me the other day, right? Like, or just helped me out with something the other day.
Van, did
right.
you put your hand up?
Yeah, oh, sorry.
Hi, I'm Van. Am I echoing at all?
A little bit, but we can hear you.
Okay, I'm Van. I'm an intern for Congresswoman Kim Schreier at WA 08. And last week we did an outreach event in Sultan, which is where I lived for the first 3 years of my life. And we had a few constituents come through and ask about the stuff that we do. We even had a few people write down issues that they have, as well as their contact information. So it was just really cool to be like face to face with the people that we help, especially in the place that I lived for the first 3 years of my life.
It's so personal. It is like the most personal touch you can have with people in your district, and it's so rewarding.
Yeah, it was super cool.
Mia, you want to share with us, and then I will keep going.
Sure. My name's Mia. I'm a caseworker out of Congresswoman Mace's office in 1st District, South Carolina. We have had a lot of Social Security cases recently, and have been so blessed to receive just like kind letters and thank you cards after the fact, which have been awesome. And just sharing how much of a difference it makes to them. And again, knowing that, we're here to help. A lot of people feel like, again, their government's against them, unfortunately. So being able to make such a difference for them and truly see it in their lives has been awesome. So getting those little thank you notes and letters have been awesome. And that's a win for me.
Absolutely. You guys are going to make me cry. And you're also like giving my presentation for me. I love you guys so much, and the work you're doing is so important. Like, I know you probably don't hear it a lot, but it really is. And these wins are just filling my heart. All right. So the next thing on my slide was the work you do is so pivotal. Yes. So casework has been found to be one of the most important and personal ways. And this is, academic finding of surveying people. This is the work that you guys do is the most long lasting and the most salient to people when they're thinking about like approval or trust of their member. So traditionally, the way that most of this works, I know we're all kind of thinking through more proactive outreach measures, but the way that it's kind of always worked is what I refer to as the reactive casework model. Now, you guys are all familiar with this, right? So we don't have to go into it as in depth as I do in other presentations where people don't even know what casework is. But in kind of like the academic terms of how I'm framing the reactive casework model is the constituent here is the first mover. They have to make a phone call, send an email, visit your website, and tell you guys about the problem, and only then can the advocacy process begin. But this model really does kind of requires a lot of the people in your district in order to participate in this way. So we know a lot about what it takes to be able to reach out and make that call. And one of the big things is having political knowledge. So they have to know A, that you can serve them in this way, and B, how to get in touch with you. They also have to be trusting, right? I'm sure all of you could go the entire hour on trust issues and hearing from people about trust issues. And they have to just believe not only that you're going to do something for you, but that there's going to be like a meaningful response. Not just you're going to pick up the phone, but you're going to do something about it, right? And then they also have to feel efficacious enough to do that. And that's just like a fancy political science term of saying, like, I believe I am capable of making this phone call, navigating the system, and getting help from you. So scholars of political science have spent decades really trying to understand and be able to predict who participates and why. Unfortunately, the field has yet to extensively study this type of contact. It's called, there was one study by Verba and Nye. If anybody's interested, email me, I'll send you the study. But it's called particularized contact, is when they're asking you specifically for something with help with casework. But what we do know about like those typical predictors of participation really can inform our assumptions, and then all of our own experiences kind of inform our assumptions about who is capable of making contact. So the socioeconomic status model has long-standing been the most stable predictor of voter or political participation at all. And it's really focused in on education, income, and occupation. So those are like the most stable determinants of who's going to be able to participate in politics. There's also a resource model that looks at time, and then importantly, what they call civic knowledge. Ashley mentioned churches, right? That's one of the places where you learn kind of that hierarchical institutional structure, right? And they need to be able to know how to go through that process. And then another one that I think is probably the most common that I see in casework is the motivation models. And these are two that are specific to casework that people have done. Very small work's been done, but there's a couple of us out here, right? In the 1990s, late 1990s, Ken Jennings found a model that's kind of a mechanism he calls pain loss. And this was people dealing with the AIDS epidemic. And it was just advocating for getting the services they need and the help they need because they were in this like sudden tragic event. We've also seen some of this coming through more for policy advocacy, but in response to these kids that are coming out of having been in school shootings and stuff. We're seeing a lot of advocacy around that, and that kind of fits in that pain loss model if it helps to understand how that one works. The other one is Jamila Michener's model of direct contact with ineffectual agencies. She did an extensive study, a book called Fragmented Democracy, which I definitely recommend, on recipients of Medicaid. And people kind of got to that end of the proverbial rope, didn't know what else to do, and reached out to them. That was what motivated them enough to reach out to the member. And for my own experience, and this is another space where we're kind of stop and talk through this a little bit, but in my own experience, that is where I would see a lot of the contact coming, particularly from people that would be in those kind of lower socioeconomic statuses. It was just people that didn't even know that we could offer advocacy, but they just didn't know what else to do. And so they called the person that was in charge of them for government, right? And I wanted to ask you guys, since I have like a wealth of people here today, like in your experience, does this match up with what you're seeing? Is it, are you seeing, and I want you to think, I think a lot of us, when we think about casework, we're thinking of like the immediate needs, right? Like immigration issues, social security issues, I already talked about Medicare, veterans benefits, right? Like the things that are like immediate. But like, let's think of other stuff too, like ordering flags, getting letters for their kids to go to a military school or a scholarship, right? I'm asking you to just kind of think through, and does what I say that the literature says match up to y'all's real experience?
I'm going to take moderator privilege to jump in and say yes, absolutely. Definitely different pockets of all three. In my experience, there was a lot of the people that were desperate and they didn't know who else to call. We always called them the Hail Mary callers, where it's like I don't even know if you can do anything. And like folks who weren't even looking for us to do things because they didn't know that we could do them, but they just wanted to say something. I always I'm talking to people who don't know what casework is. I always kind of want to bring that up of like the thing that I always heard from constituents that felt most meaningful to me was when folks called and they said, like, I'm a lost cause. I already went through this. This was awful. But I want to make sure that this doesn't happen to anyone else. So it's like the pain and loss kind of has a little flip to it sometimes where it's like, this isn't for me, but this is for my community. This is for my neighbors. To Ashley's point earlier, I always really loved those moments. But anyone else, please jump in, raise your hand, whatever's easiest.
Hey, Claire Walford.
Come on in. Yeah, come on in, Taylor.
Taylor?
Taylor, we can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I will say I agree with that. A lot of those that we have is the cases who are like, I didn't even know I could call my congressional office for this help. So I just second what she was saying. Like, we definitely have the same thing.
Yeah.
Like we see the same thing a lot, like especially with older seniors who may have had help with like Social Security or Medicare issues or things like that. Like they have no clue that we could help them.
Yeah, I like Anne's. I might steal that, Anne. They're going to be the Hail Mary callers from now on because that's what it is, right? Like you're just like, I don't even know, but this is my last thing. Mia, did you want to jump back in?
Sure. I definitely agree with what they've been saying. And I will say too, and it kind of goes along with the wins that we were talking about earlier. I even had a constituent come in today who had no idea that what she was experiencing is something that we could help with until she was talking with someone at her church and had mentioned that we had helped her with a similar issue. And she was like, you need to go to your congressperson. And so word of mouth has been awesome recently. I've been seeing a pickup in that of other cases that we've helped with, and they've been able to spread the word some. We definitely get a lot of quote unquote Hail Mary callers as well. A lot of, last resort, last option, have nowhere else to turn type calls. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Whitney.
Hi there, this is Whitney from Senator Merkley's office in Oregon, and I think we've got kind of a mix of these. We do see, people who are calling and don't know that we can really help, but then we also have, I think, folks of a certain socioeconomic status that are very aware of our office, have the resources, know all about it, and they call us again and again because they feel very entitled to our assistance. And that we are there to serve them and call repeatedly. So it's a little bit of a mix of those who have no idea and are just calling, on the off chance that you might be able to do something versus those who are like, I've got my member on speed dial. Anytime anything comes up for me, I'm going to call repeatedly. And I'm going to tell my family that they should also call when they have issues. So we get certain people that we worked, 4 or 5 cases for, or, them and their spouse also and their kids. And I think like the socioeconomic status we see also in some of those other types of services you were mentioning, like service academies, that unfortunately is something that we see as kind of very socioeconomic driven. The folks of like higher incomes and are already looking at kind of those elite colleges generally have more resources and knowledge are also the ones like coming to us for service academies because they're aware of them. They have maybe family history of having gone there in the past. And so to a certain extent, unfortunately, like reinforcing some of the lack of diversity that exists in those academies.
And I mean, you're absolutely spot on, Whitney. And when we think about like the networks that it takes to like know that these things are available, right? Like if we look at the demographics of Congress, the circles they run in, the alumni associations they're a part of, the organizations they're a part of, right? Like people that are equal or similarly situated are gonna know, have access and be able to build those networks and know that those things are available just in passing because they know Uncle so-and-so's friend, the senator, who told them that if they ever needed anything, come on by, right? So it really is kind of like this diverse split. And I'm gonna skip ahead because you guys are with it. Like I don't need to, I feel like I don't need, normally there's a lot more convincing. You guys are on board. Love it. But what I will talk you through is kind of what we were just talking about, right? So this is a simulation that I created of need in a district. So along the x-axis, you can think of any of those predictors that we were talking about, socioeconomic status, resource, networks, right? We kept circling back to like churches. That's one of the biggest ones that they say, like really links people in and prepares them for political participation. But put any of those on the x-axis, and let's say it takes a 7 or higher to have the knowledge needed to be able to make contact, right? And then on the y-axis, we have motivation. And this isn't just, I think sometimes a question I get is like, well, if we're just going to switch to like helping all the poor people, like we're just going to reach a different segment. That's not what I'm saying. Like motivation here can be operationalized. The way I operationalize it is whether it impacts your income, housing, or access to food. So those are what I consider to be high motivating factors. And here, if it is getting your kid into the same, getting your kid into West Point because you went to West Point, your grandpa went to West Point, like that would be a very high motivating factor for that person's future income projections, right? So you would either need like a 7 or higher on motivation or a 7 or higher on knowledge. And as you can see here, even the most dedicated team, if you're just relying on the people coming to you, you're missing a huge segment of the population that needs help. And the only other thing that, hold on, I do want to go back to one thing earlier in the slides, because I think it's important for all of us to know and live with it in our hearts, right? There's this great political scientist from the 70s, Abramson, and he came up with what's called the political reality model. So when we're thinking about that distribution again, right? Like it's not only something that we should expect, but also something that we should accept as reality for certain segments of the population. Abramson's model says, in a political system characterized by majority rule, minorities realize that they have little political power, and they respond to this reality by exhibiting negative political attitudes and expecting little representation in the political system. So even if we are hoping that we can reach people and stuff, like there are people that for them, the rational choice is to think that this is not something that's going to work for them. And they're never going to come to you on their own. You're going to have to go to them, right? And so that's why I'm presenting today proactive casework. The proactive casework theory really just switches with the first mover in that relationship. So instead of relying on the constituent to come to you, the representative takes on the role of the first mover. Now, I did the first pilot of this at the state level. So we did it with phone calls, right? But I want to be clear, that's just one method that your office could use to proactively reach members in the district. So for this version, the way that we did it is we used the existing campaign software eCanvasser that randomly dialed the vetted list from L2 of constituents in the district. We typically see this software used in offices for mobilization or fundraising efforts, but we switched it around, used it for this purpose, and activated interns in the office to use the same software to call members in the district and just ask 2 simple questions. Are you experiencing any issues with the state agency? And if so, how can we help? I know phone banking can kind of be a massive lift, particularly in larger districts. So again, I want to be clear, the preliminary pilot of PCT used phone banking, and it was conducted at the state level because I had connections at the state level and was able to convince somebody to go out on this limb with me, right? But I do believe this can work at the federal level, and I believe there's multiple ways that you and your outreach office can work to make this happen. But we used phone banking, right? We made the calls and we asked the 2 questions. Now, the phone banking, hold on, oh, I did add this for you guys, because one of the things that I was talking through with another federal rep about how this could possibly work was doing mailers and with like a fridge magnet that was like, if you need something, call us. I'm not a graphic designer, I'm a political scientist, but here's a nice little example of Mr. Rogers' mailer that he would send out. Slap it on the side of the fridge. If you have any issues, you know to call, right? There's many ways that you and your teams can think through about implementation. And at this point, I do want to ask, because I have been, when I started this and I was in the literature, there is no record of proactive casework. It doesn't exist, right? But since I've been in the field and talking to people, I'm finding places where people have gone out and knocked doors specifically to ask about issues surrounding COVID. People are trying to reach out, right? So now I would love to open it up and see if anybody has done any type of proactive outreach before we jump in and I show you guys the results from the trial. Yeah, Ashley.
Hey there. So it sounds similar, but we call it actually anticipatory casework. So how that is structured in our office, again, we're rural, we're in Indiana. So right now we're in the middle of spring storms. What we have done is we have partnered our caseworkers with our field reps. And we have the field reps go out to our EMA offices, to our FEMA offices, everything else like that. We're in the middle of tornado season. We actually had 2 tornadoes last night in our district. So I'm covering the phones right now while our field reps scout it. But we have found that we can actually mobilize a lot faster, making sure that those relationships with our community partners are strong, because we know every year in Indiana, we're going to have spring storms. And so I know we're in the middle of summer, but spring is relative. However, being able to, like I said, anticipate it, our field reps know how to at least get a case started with those agencies, with those emergency responses. They know the community partners that need to be reached. And also, when we go do our on the ground survey after a natural disaster, after an event like that, we find more receptiveness from the community, because it's not, we're meeting with our FEMA contact for the first time on the ground surveying tornado damage. We've had an established relationship with them. We renew it every year. We make sure that contact stays up to date. And so we can anticipate that that's going to happen. Similarly, we know that every April 15th, we're going to have an influx of IRS casework. That allows us to anticipate that influx to a degree. We can put more eyes on cases to even up the workload. We tend to divide our work by agency focus. However, we do try and do cross training where possible. So when we have a surplus of cases, we can triage that out and reduce it off of just one caseworker. So our proactive approach is actually more anticipatory, based on cycles and trends that we've seen for our district. So, but yeah, the big one that comes to mind, because it happened last night, is our weather events are pretty well known. So that's what we work on in terms of how our office structures it. But the biggest one is cross training and anticipating needs based on previous trends. Now, we always get that 1 in 1,000 situation. Afghanistan a few years ago comes to mind. That was not something we were expecting, so we were triaging in real time. But there are other things that are a little bit more predictable, and we try and reduce that burden. So if we do get an unexpected event, we're better able to manage the needs of the district, and also reduce the potential burnout of staff members. So that is all I have on that.
That's more than enough. That's amazing. And it's like, it's so reassuring to hear that this is, because one of the things I really believe is so important is the district specificity of how you design this program, right? Like, nobody knows your district better than you, and nobody's going to know the needs of the people on average, right, more intimately than the people that are taking these phone calls every day and answering these emails every day. So like leaning on them to help design proactive, or I love it, anticipatory casework. Like this is exactly what I'm proposing as being like the fix. And it's so good to hear that it's already happening out there. Whitney, what you got?
Hi. So similar to kind of what Elise was putting in the chat, we often pair some of our proactive outreach with town halls and kind of events that the senator's doing. So we'll include in the invitations, like that goes out through our newsletter list and things like that. Sometimes we even send postcards for those to our rural areas, that there will be caseworkers at the town hall and that people are welcome to bring their issues, and, you know, we'll be available to discuss those at the town halls. We used to see quite a lot of response to that. And one thing that's kind of been interesting to note is that I feel like since COVID, people are reluctant to come out for that. Just, you know, seems like things have changed a lot, and either they're not as comfortable like coming and sharing that in a more public setting where it's not kind of as intimate as like a one-on-one conversation with a caseworker, or they've, you know, distrust has grown and they're just not feeling like we would do anything if they came. But we have seen like a huge drop off compared to what we saw before the pandemic in terms of who comes to the town halls and brings casework issues. We still, you know, offer that, but we've just seen a lot less uptake, which has been kind of disappointing for my team, because that used to be, you know, a great way to connect with people and we could meet them in person too. The other thing that we do is also, like Ashley, kind of pair our casework outreach with our field representatives and what they're doing. And so we'll often do that as like meeting with, like when our field reps are meeting with different organizations, especially with underserved communities, they take flyers about casework. So we don't have fancy magnets. That would be super cool. But we have a black and white flyer that we give to people. And so our field reps will pass them out to the organizations and then kind of encourage the organization and their staff to tell others. So kind of hoping that they can reach people that we wouldn't normally reach. So a lot of times we can't talk directly to the affected community as much as we would love to, but we can use kind of those people that are their trusted contacts to tell them about what we do and that we could be a resource. And then we do actually get some uptake from that. And, oh, this group referred me to you, this organization that like, they weren't kind of in the know network until that organization knew about us and then could tell them to come to us.
Yeah, and you guys have hit on that a couple of times, but like we have found time and time again that those we call them like personal referral. It's like it's not just for casework, we use it for like voting preferences and stuff too, right? But when it comes from a trusted neighbor and organization, when they feel like somebody doesn't have an agenda, it's much more trusted than even sometimes when it's coming from the office. Something we did here in the PCT calls was for the pilot was people being like, oh, well, I'm never going to vote for him. And they'd be like, well, it's okay. Like, we want to help you anyway. Right. But their immediate suspicion was like, oh, this is a call about a vote. Right. So breaking that down and getting past that, and particularly partnering with local organizations, is so pivotal in this. And you'll see when we get into that, when you are doing proactive outreach, if those partnerships are really strong, a lot of this stuff is things that oftentimes you're getting called. I know we would get a lot of stuff where it would be calls where people were calling and they had a problem, but it wasn't something that an agency could help them with, right? So we'd have to refer them out to someone. And I'll show you guys the numbers in a little bit, but a large portion of our cases were things where it wasn't anything a state agency could do, but we can refer you to an organization that gives out Narcan, or we can refer you to an organization that's doing mutual aid and food pantries. So we're going to get there. Okay. All right. Let's keep moving. All right, so the pilot. So in partnership with the Office of Delegate Sam Russell in Virginia's 38th House District, who I cannot give enough love, thanks, and wonderful joy to, we conducted the pilot of PCT. So the way that we did this is I took the recorded case. Well, we did our calls in 2023 for a 3-month period, and I compared it to the recorded request for service and call logs from the same period during 2022. So what we did here was just, again, weekend calls, volunteer networks coming in for doing about 1 to 2 hour shift during that time period. And it was just for 3 months. Most of it was weekends, and we did have 3 sessions where it was during the weekday. So under the RCM, so under reactive casework, Sam's district saw 31 calls during this period that resulted in 28 actual requests for service. During the same 3-month period in 2023, we reached 1,728 constituents with 1,106 requests for service, which represented a 25% increase in requests for service per contact with person. It also reflected that massive distance that we saw before about the perceived need in the district versus actual need when you're going out and kind of searching for it. Another thing that we did with PCT, because one of the big things here for me is reaching underserved populations, was that I was able to look at all the calls for both and the service requests for both and categorize them as either privileged, neutral, or marginalized, just so we could get an idea of the types, like the subpopulations within the district that were being reached. So an example for like how this worked, right? Like 2 calls were both initially put under the housing category. But when I looked into the notes and saw what was in there, one of the callers was having trouble navigating the Virginia HUD complaint system for a derelict property that was crawling with mice and rodents. And they had been calling and trying to get a complaint in, and it wasn't working. This is obviously something that was categorized as marginalized. Another call that fell into the housing category was someone that was calling that was trying to get, having trouble getting the sheriffs to initiate a eviction process for somebody that was behind on rent, that was a tenant. This is something that's going to fall into that privileged category. So using this classification system, I was able to look at the cases under the reactive model, and then what we were able to do under the proactive model. And under the reactive model, roughly 50% of service requests represented underserved populations. So you guys are doing the work. You're getting in there, you're doing it. About 50% of what you're doing in a typical district, like if we're looking at Sam's, is reaching those people, because let's be honest, that's where a lot of the need comes from, is interaction, direct interaction with the agencies, right? But under PCT, we were able to increase this to 78% of service requests. So people that, again, didn't know this was available, didn't know advocacy was available, particularly a lot of it came around unemployment. So my caseworkers, I know some of you might be kind of like spinning right now, thinking about calling every member of your district or trying to send a letter to every member of your district. So just to tell you, even with the call program, 18% of constituents that were reached did not require any help at all. And I know something I've got a little bit of pushback on is people being worried about people being angry or nasty, right? And we even had that one guy that did say, like, I'm never going to vote for him. But out of all of the calls that we made, only about 2% were noted as being like angry enough to end the call or being asked to be removed from like the call list, right? 11%, again, these are state cases, 11% of these could immediately be sent up to the federal office. Something I have been hearing, and you guys can share your experience with this after we get through this section, is that there's a lot of confusion of federal work going to state workers and state work going to federal workers. And a lot of times that pass off process isn't as seamless as it needs to be. So that's definitely something I want to talk to you guys about how to better build that relationship, hopefully to figure out a way to kind of build that bridge a little bit more. Also 5% of the people reached just wanted to discuss policy. So this is, another avenue for, even if we're not anybody, they don't need anything, it may be an avenue for them to just talk with somebody, either find out more about your policy or feel heard in expressing something that they think. And then a huge concern that I heard is also about potential wasted time in making the calls. Out of all the calls we had, so about a little over 1,000, right? Only 8% were never returned. It was like a never returned voicemail. So a final note here, and something that we've kind of already talked about a little bit, and Anne has stressed with the change in that House ethic rules, is about the importance of building those nonprofit and NGO relationships, so that when you are doing this, you can still do casework and have a good feeling and have a good relationship and a good experience with a voter or a member of your district. And you're also not having to take on any additional work for your office. So when we ran this, 12% of all of the calls were able to be outsourced to a local organization. So again, positive touch, positive experience, and no additional work for the office. These weren't even, never even came back to the caseworker. In the system that we created, you can use Qualtrics or any of the CRMs, but you create a script, you can use Google Forms, you create a script, and it, as you click through, it takes your volunteer, your intern, every different places. And on the end of that, there was lists of resources based on the type of call and type of request it was. So that's about 50% of all of this contact that does not result in any additional work for the office, other than offering information or at most contacting another office to pass off the case. So hopefully I've shown that proactive casework can serve as to overcome a myriad of access gaps for constituents, and also how elected officials can implement these changes to positively impact the lives of people in their district. I do think also something that is important, and I don't want to overlook, is the importance of this proactive casework on for your member. So first is the most obvious, is an increase in name recognition in the district for incumbent officials. In 2023, where we ran the pilot, the district had 52,721 registered voters. So during the RCM period in 2022, only 0.05% of registered voters in the district had any contact with their member regarding casework. And this, again, we talked about how great it can do for building good feelings and stuff. Under the PCT, with the increase in contact, that was 3.5% of the district that had a call, that got a touch, right? So when they're in that booth, even if they don't know anything else, they're like, I remember I got a call from that guy's office, right? And again, this is where I had the thing, I think Ashley already hit on it, but this is where I had the water cooler thing, right? Like, we know these are stories that people share. They're excited, they're happy that somebody called them. It's a rare event that your representative did something good for you, particularly in this era of people having a lot of negative feelings and low trust, right? So this is something that has legs. The next thing is going to be subsidizing oversight. This one's really big. So Cox and McCubbins are kind of like the oversight guys in poli-sci, and they talk about two different ways in which representatives conduct oversight. One is police patrol, which is where you're constantly checking in with the agencies, holding hearings and investigations. And the other is the fire alarm method. And with the fire alarm, you're basically saying, well, a constituent will pull the alarm when there's a problem. When you're using proactive casework, you're metaphorically installing a fire alarm in every house in your district. And more importantly, you're empowering your people to pull it in case of an emergency. This goes a really long way in letting your member know what's going on with the provision of services from federal agencies in your district specifically. And again, as it was pointed out, with like the specific needs of your district, like your district may be the only one that needs a specific provision under FEMA for one, thing that's happening with a specific thing in your area. Not everybody's going to know that. Not everybody's going to know to check for that. But as you continue to do this work, you are empowering your constituents to be able to come to you guys and let you know when things aren't working the way they should be. It also increases approval. There was a 2023 study where just telling people about work that their specific senator had done, it needed to be specific to their district or to their state, but just telling them about work that their senator had done for other people in their area, casework specifically, increased their approval of the senator by 9 percentage points. It also, again, we've talked about this at length already, but extending networks. The more people you touch, the more people know, and the more people you have available to you to not only help you reach others, but also to continue to carry the message of your office doing amazing things for the community. So there are some remaining questions. As I said, I did this at the state level, so I'd be really interested in hearing your thoughts on how this would work at the federal level, if you think a call campaign at the federal level would even be possible. And also, I would love to hear anything more that you guys have to say about whether or not you think proactive work is needed in the district. That was it. Sorry, I didn't nail the landing. That's on me.
Let me just stop and say huge, huge, huge round of applause. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Megan. This is such critical work, and so, so, so important. And it's just wonderful to have numbers on that feeling we've all had as caseworkers being like, I know I'm missing someone. Who am I missing? How can I get to them? So kind of having something concrete to take back to a team, take back to a district director, to take back to field staff, I hope will be super helpful for folks here. I do have some questions, but I suspect we have a lot of questions and thoughts in the audience. So folks, please raise your hand, jump on in. We really want to make sure we have time for a discussion for all of us to learn from each other here.
So Megan, one of the worries that my team always has about proactive outreach is like, we already are behind on the cases we have from the reactive method, and there's just always so much incoming through that method as well. So I think a little bit different than the state rep's office model that you showed, like we already feel like we get it. I mean, we know we're not touching everyone, but we still get a ton of reactive stuff just on its own, and worry that if we do a bunch of proactive outreach, especially to marginalized communities, they will come to us, they will have needs, they will ask for things, and then we won't be able to serve them because we don't have capacity. And that would potentially, increase those feelings of distrust or marginalization and kind of backfire on us because we wouldn't have the capacity to help them. And short of especially in the Senate, getting some increase in budget for staff, which seems very far off, we don't know how we could increase capacity to serve all the need that we know is out there.
Yeah. Do you think all right, let me probe a little though. Do you feel like any of that is things that having better relationships with the state members would allow you to pass some of it off, or is it exclusively federal need for your office that is a proper case?
I feel like a lot of it is federal need, or we do hear about a lot of housing issues that would be even more local government potentially versus state, and local is tapped out and no orgs available to help with homeless services and things like that.
That's one to really think about, right? Because you want to be able to help people, but if you don't have the capacity, you raise an amazing point, right? They come to you, you can't help them, and we've doubled down on the bad, not the good. So
I will say, let me jump in just to say, this is also part of what I hope is on our plate as Pop Fox Foundation and as a lot of the other organizations really focused on increasing congressional capacity, thinking about legislative capacity more broadly. There is a super important case to be made for what additional staff capacity can do for Congress, and that it's not just comms, it's not just social media, it's not just ridiculous questions and hearings. It is actually filling this really specific need that no other agency, no other government entity is filling. So being able to kind of hear from Megan's research and then hear from y'all to say hey, we can't do the things our constituents are asking us to do is really important for making that case. So
Yeah.
thank you. I want to make sure y'all don't come away feeling like this is on your shoulders. Like, let me take this on mine with the other groups working to fix Congress. It's definitely something that we're banging the drum for.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Andrew. I'm in Senator Sanders' office up in Vermont, and I think I really identify with what Whitney was saying with that capacity. It's really interesting. I mean, we have a robust casework team, but also, you know, a very popular boss, and we get a lot of telephone calls, a lot of emails from constituents who have needs, and you know, it's a small state, and people are really familiar with the delegation. But also just an enormous amount of incoming. And then something happens on the other side of the world, and the phones in the state office and in DC are impenetrable for weeks. And so proactive outreach, which we do from time to time, you know, also can run into those roadblocks where now you're telling people, hey, do you have a problem? Give our ops a call. But there maybe are also 10,000 other people across the country calling because of any number of things. So it's an interesting sort of like dance and balance with a, you know, kind of a based on the position of the office.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's rough when it's so overwhelming with all the things, right, that you have to sift through it to find the good things. I think that's why it's so important that there are good folks like the people at Popbox that are working on like coming up with solutions and ideas for how to work through these types of things, and maybe infrastructure to help work through these types of things. I know most all of you probably have it already on your website, right, where they can just fill out the form and send it in. So I think it's thinking through what innovations need to be made either in office or at large, right? Where can we fight for you to get you what you need to be able to make this happen?
And one thing on that I'll just pop up, if folks have ideas, it's something we've been noodling on and really haven't kind of come up with a concrete recommendation yet. But one thing that the House in particular has been thinking through, this is one of our recommendations to the select committee, and then in our report on Afghanistan casework, was thinking through how the House can provide surge capacity for caseworkers in districts that are experiencing disasters.
Yeah.
Y'all, this is so crazy complicated. We have run into so many roadblocks and trying to figure out how it could work, let alone the political willpower to get it to happen. But if you have ideas, if you've seen ways that offices have handled surge capacity in disasters, this is an open invitation to please let me know. I would love to talk to you if you have ideas, so we can try to push that up.
I mean, every disaster and situation is different, but I'll just say, like with COVID, because we weren't able to do the same kind of in-person outreach because everyone was mostly staying at home and our state was very locked down in terms of what kind of public things could happen, we were essentially able to cut our outreach staff quite a bit. A lot of their travel budget in particular got cut, and we hired an additional caseworker, which was what was needed in the time to serve all the people that were coming to us. And that worked really well in that surge time because of the particular type of event that COVID was. But I don't know that it would work the same in other circumstances, you know, like more like a natural disaster. Our field reps need to be out there and interacting, you know, on the ground, and we wouldn't be able to have kind of their budget to surge casework.
We're coming up on time, and I want to do a couple of last things, but Ashley, I see you have your hand up. Do you one last question?
No, just going on the surge policy. I'm going to use a harsh word because I just don't know how to otherwise to do it. But we had mandated quiet hours for staff dealing with surge. We experienced a large amount of burnout, and while some things some things require a response, our office was very good about mandating both quiet hours as well as making sure that staff were utilizing resources like the OEA's office as well. And again, the term mandate is very harsh because it was truly a kindness to everyone involved. But making sure that even if you have a staff member that goes, no, I'm fine, I can handle this, I'm good, that's fine. Just soundboard anyway. Just see what comes out of it. I don't have to be there, but just like, I don't know, talk to somebody that's not directly here and in our office echo chamber, because we have a very tiny district staff, we're only 6 people. And so it was having the understanding of, unless you are bleeding from the eyeballs and on fire, do not bother this person for the next 5 hours and let them get some sleep, no matter what else happens. That was actually really helpful. And sometimes just having management be aware that one of their roles is not only to execute the member's vision, but also to step up and defend staff that will otherwise work themselves into the ground. That's a big thing as well. So just management, however you want to phrase that, being aware that they have a dual responsibility. They are that bridge between the member and between their staff. And sometimes we get lost in the weeds that it's always about the member's vision. And sometimes we need to turn that around and reflect that the member is not going to be anywhere without their staff. So that's my
huge amen to that.
Absolutely. And I'm just gonna throw this in, Anne, and then you can close this out. But I do want to say this, like, that's such a good point, Ashley. And y'all take care of y'all. Like, you're doing such important work. What you are doing matters so much, and you are valuable and important, and like an important part of our American democracy. If an academic has never told you that before, it happened right now. So please take care of yourself as we go through and figure this stuff out and figure out how to best support you and how I can best give information to you guys to fight for yourselves and for Anne and others to fight for you. Take care of yourself in the meantime, please, and thank you.
So that's such an important note to close on. So let me just say once again, Megan, thank you so much for your work and for being here today. I have learned so much from your work previously, today, just continue to learn. So thank you. Let me just flag a couple of quick things. I know we are at time, so I'll do this super quickly. All of our resources from Popbox Foundation about casework, supporting casework, thinking about how to do great casework are on our website, popbox.org/casework, including some relevant things to this final part of the conversation around handling burnout and care for each other. So we had a fabulous webinar on that previously. So I hope if that's helpful for folks that you'll go check that out along with everything else we do. Clearly, we have so much to talk about on outreach and casework. I'm really excited to say that we have another discussion in this series next week with Megan and my mutual friend, Ian McKnight, and also our Popbox Foundation Summer Fellow and former local government superstar staffer, Nick DeKuzlian. So that is next week on the 17th at 4 p.m. Eastern. We'll hope you come join. We'll focus on building relationships with the state and local level to do some of that collaborative casework. The last thing, again, there's so many ideas here. There's so much going on. I just wanted to do a quick shameless plug on both of our behalfs. If you are interested in talking more individually with either of us on how you're thinking about outreach, I know Megan is always looking for folks to jump into her research and think about just data-driven approaches to understanding proactive versus reactive casework and who are you contacting. There's her email in the chat. Perfect. Please reach out. Our team is also doing a series of interviews with district offices about how are you thinking about outreach more broadly. We're hearing a lot about how AI is changing the face of constituent engagement, and our contention is that there is more creativity, resilience, and just cool stuff happening in districts than district offices and Congress gets credit for. So if you're interested in doing a quick interview with me on how is your team thinking about outreach, if you want to send me to one of your outreach staffers, I would so appreciate it. My email is all over everything, but just in case, and at popbox.org. All right, and I think that is it for me. So let me say once again, thank you all. It's so great to see you again. It's great to be back for these webinars. Hang in there. Let me know if there's anything else that we can do, any other topics you want us to cover, and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Thanks, guys.